Well, good evening, everybody. Yes, I've always wanted to cover this show because then I get to go to the bar, don't I, after this. So Talking Pints with Harvey Proctor is up right now. Former Conservative MP, real character, a man who's had a fascinating career, a fascinating life. Harvey, thank you very much for joining us here. Cheers to you as well, my good man. I hope you're keeping well.
Thank
you very much. I must say, this is very civilised. They don't let me do this on my normal show, 10 a.m. until midday, for obvious reasons. But there we go. Bad luck not to drink after a cheers.
Good.
Right, so look, thank you very much for coming in. I mean, it's difficult to know where to start with you, really. I mean, I think let's start with the kind of infamous issues that took place, back in the day, I suppose, 1986, 1987. And just run our viewers and our listeners as well through what happened, really. And I understand that you want to kind of maybe set the record straight a little bit.
Well, in 1986-87, I was prosecuted on 4 charges of gross indecency. I was and am a homosexual. I don't promote that, but it's just a matter of fact. And in those days, the age of consent for homosexuals was unequal in that heterosexual age of consent was 16, homosexual was 21. There was also a lacuna in the law between heterosexual and homosexuals, and that is in the homosexual area of the law. If you thought that the person you'd been with was genuinely over the age of consent, but in fact they were one day under, you automatically committed an offence in the homosexual case, but not in the heterosexual case. And therefore, in those years, I became a demon, a devil incarnate. And there were a number of reasons behind that, which I don't think truly came out.
Okay.
Not just the law, but that I crossed a chap who was a publisher then, Robert Maxwell.
Yes.
And Robert Maxwell, the infamous Robert Maxwell, didn't like me because I defeated his friend in Basildon in 1979 and won Basildon with the largest swing in England to take a seat in 1979. He didn't like me for that. He didn't like me because I'd sued one of his newspapers for libel and won.
Right.
And I thought it was not right for a publisher of a newspaper not just to try his papers to report the news, but to make the news by putting 20 reporters down into my constituency to try to persuade them to vote against me in my Executive Council meetings. Now, Robert Maxwell, this is not normally known, he pretends to be Jewish.
Right.
He was not Jewish. It was Jewish when he thought it was in his interests.
Right.
He's as Jewish as a bacon sandwich. Right. Now, it's about time that somebody actually said that, and I said it tonight.
Well, I'm glad you did, of course. And look, it's an amazing sign of how times have changed, isn't it, really? The way that you were vilified, like you said, demonised, really, for, I suppose, expressing your sexual preferences.
In private.
In private.
In private, not proselytising the case at all. And, of course, that then lost me my job, a job that I thought was an honourable thing to be, a Member of Parliament. Of course, most people are subjected, perhaps, maybe, in their life to one scandal. I have been placed in the unique position, I think, of experiencing 2 pretty major public scandals, because then it went on to Operation Midland.
Absolutely.
7 or 8 years ago. And there I became pariah because I was accused of being a serial murdering child murderer and abuser.
Which is, let's be honest, as bad as it gets, right?
Well, you can't say anything worse about a human being than that. And, of course, the police came out and said that was credible and true.
Credible and true.
For a second time, I this time lost my home, my job, and my repute. So uniquely positioned now to deal with people who have lost their reputation, damage to their reputation through false allegations and by misconduct by the police, because it still goes on. And I'm uniquely placed, I think, to help people now who have similar sort of problems. And indeed, may be interesting to your viewers to know that I've already been approached and helped high-profile individuals who've had similar, but not the same, damaging things made against them for their reputation. And also I've helped people who perhaps don't have a voice or a private wallet, who have also been falsely accused.
Would you be able to give us a couple of examples, or no?
Well, perhaps not in terms of names, but I am prepared, knowing the difficulties of going through such horrendous times, to try where I can to help those, whether they're in the public eye or not, if they are falsely accused.
OK, just talk to me a bit about what that was like on an emotional level for you. I cannot imagine anything worse than being accused of the kind of things that you were accused of. And to then have the credible and true element of it, there is a strange part of, I don't think it's just the British psyche, I think general psyche really, where some people go, well, I suppose there's no smoke without fire. And so then therefore, all of a sudden, the public can get on board with a false accusation.
It was
your world was fallen apart.
It was, as my QC said, there can be smoke without fire. It's a big, gigantic smoke machine with the handle being turned by the Metropolitan Police and certain sections of the media. And I took them on and beat them.
Yes.
And now I think that I am regarded in the media, or most sections of the media, and most people know what the truth is.
No, exactly. But people know that side about you, Harvey, about the side of you being stoic and standing up, taking them on, winning. But what people won't have seen is what you were like when that front door closed and the noise stopped and you were sat there on your own. What was that like?
Quite horrendous.
Are you OK to talk about it?
And if anyone hasn't faced that sort of pressure, continuous pressure, day after day, it is horrendous. And so that is why I don't want anybody else to go through those sort of feelings again. And that's why I try to help, where I can, those who have been falsely accused. I'm supporting an organisation called FAIR, Falsely Accused Individuals for Reform, because I think one important change needed in the law is to make sure that people, suspects, have anonymity.
Yeah, that's an important
victims, the correct term should be complainants until the trial has taken place and a suspect has been found guilty. But complainants have anonymity. So should suspects and those alleged to have done things.
Indeed. I'm inclined to agree with you on that, and the clamour for that is growing, actually, I think, as well. And what do you make, then, of the police? Because Cressida Dick has now fallen on her sword in a way, or resigned eventually. And they really put you through the ringer there. I understand that you received some compensation, but I suppose, financial remuneration cannot patch over the wounds, I suppose, can it?
Yes, but with very ill grace by the Metropolitan Police.
Right.
They, even after the person who made the allegations, their star witness, who they didn't want to investigate, had been found guilty of many charges of perverting the course of justice, even then the Metropolitan Police tried to defend themselves legally as though I was still the suspect.
Yeah, sure.
And so I had to fight again to get mediation, and then within mediation to try to get fair recompense from the police. And even though I had great support, financial support from backers and good legal support, the cost of Operation Midland to me, which I can't recoup, is £500,000. That is the cost of Operation Midland to me, £500,000. And it isn't. That £500,000 is for nothing compared with the effect on yourselves, your family, and your friends.
Yeah.
It is horrendous.
Did you lose friends over it? Are there people who cast you aside at the time and have maybe been a bit too embarrassed to come back or not?
Yes. I'm not sure which is worse, those or those who were quiet when the going was tough.
Yes.
And then when, of course, it was quite clear to everyone with the Enriquez report and with the trial that there was nothing in it at all, trying to scramble their way back.
Well, I'm sure you won't have forgotten that, so it doesn't sound like you have, nor should you as well. We're coming towards the end now, but this has flown by. I could talk to you all evening. You stick around for a little bit because we're going to get a few questions from the public as well. But just before we start to move on to that, really, I wanted to get your take on the current crop of MPs that we have at the moment. I think a lot of people feel very disenfranchised. A lot of people, frankly, don't really know what a lot of them stand for. What's your take on the current crop?
Well, I'm sure that every ex-MP is critical of those who come after. I place a lot of the blame for the diminishing standards of members of Parliament with Tony Blair, because Tony Blair changed the law to diminish the power of Parliament over the executive, over government, because he wanted an easy ride. And that meant, in part, quite noticeable changes to Parliament. You can't speak for as long as you want in Parliament as you used to be able to do. Members of Parliament now are limited into the length of speeches that they can make in Parliament.
Yeah.
How does that show? Well, in the media, your programmes and others, other channels, sound bites.
Oh, yeah.
They go for sound bites. Try to go beyond the sound bite.
Yeah.
They have no intellect to argue their case.
No, I'm sick of it at all, and actually it's insulting to the public. It's insulting to the public that they think, OK, I'll fob them off with, this slogan, whatever it is, or it's Build Back Better. I mean, you could take your pick, couldn't you? And actually, we're better than that. We deserve better than that. We've got more going on up here than that.
There used to be a time when slogans inevitably came about in general elections. Now, you have them day after day after day.
You're relentless. Right. Thank you very much, Harvey. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. Cheers. You are an absolute gentleman and a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much. There we go.